Let me tell you a story. So, my depression when I was younger was most definitely a symptom of my lifestyle. So, my old lifestyle was I would go to school, come home, play video games, and that was really it. It was depressing, it was empty. I was eating junk food. My life was going downhill like this. And so, one day I'm discovering, self-improvement videos just like a lot of guys, and I see that you could flip the chart, I see that you can start to make the chart go from down to up, and I'm getting into the gym, I'm getting into dieting, and I hear this topic about friends. Your friends are going to, turn against you when you get on self-improvement. Your old friends, they're not going to be supportive. And I didn't want to believe this, I'll be honest. Like, I did not like the idea of that happening. My friends turning, I was like, there's no way that'll happen. But eventually they did. I remember one night, I was still playing video games while I was starting off in the gym. And I remember it was just a day where I went to the gym, I come home, I'm playing video games. And, they're kind of mad that I'm not playing video games as much. And I remember I was about to go to bed, right? And I was going to bed a lot earlier than what I used to as well, because, I would normally stay up playing video games, but now I wanted to go to bed on time so I could, testosterone and everything, whatever. And I remember they started to bully me for doing that. They started to be mean to me for going to bed on time. And, I hated the advice of, cutting off the old friends and stuff. But yeah, man, eventually I did. And that is the first step of this blueprint, is to abandon your old life. And this is easily the hardest step. This is, a lot of people are already going to click off, I'll be honest, because this is the step that no one wants to follow when you're trying to beat your depression. And so I remember the thing I would always ask myself is just, how bad do you want it? Like, you could always look up the motivation tips, to stay consistent and whatever, but it's always this one question, and this still sticks with me 3 years later, is how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to get this result? If you want it bad enough, you will do what is necessary. So I remember I would start to cut off my old friends, and I'll be honest, I was alone when I cut them off. And I remember I was cutting off the bad food instantly. Instantly, I stopped eating all the bad food and I started getting into dieting. So many people will struggle with dieting or whatever, but I would always ask myself, okay, how bad do I want it? If I want it bad enough, then I'm going to, cut off the bad food so I can improve my life and cure my depression. We'll get on the topic later about how I was able to basically cure the loneliness on this path that we're on. But the second step of this path is to, create a new lifestyle. So I set a new identity of someone I wanted to be. I started working out, I started dieting, I started getting into martial arts. Eventually I started to learn about entrepreneurship. Then I wanted to start a YouTube channel and everything. You could see how this new sort of lifestyle that I created, that before the chart was like this, the chart was going downhill. You can see how I would get depressed when my chart, my success in life, my happiness in life, my looks, everything is just going downhill. It just sucked. And what makes me so pissed off is that so many people will say depression, it's an illness, it's something in my brain, it's some what do they call it, some sort of deficiency in your brain of something. I forgot what it's called. I think that is so bullshit. Obviously if a family member dies, the family dog passes away, obviously that's not a symptom of your lifestyle. But for example, in my family, there's a huge thing with addiction. In my blood, there's some sort of addiction issue. I didn't give a shit. I'll be honest, I did not give a shit. I've been told that my whole life. And when I started to diet, I instantly quit the addiction of, sugary bullshit food. Because it's not genetic. It's not some bullshit. You need to take responsibility for everything in your life as a young man. And so that's what I did. That's what I did with depression. I knew that I caused my own depression. I was living such a shit lifestyle. I wasn't even doing any exercise or any healthy habits. I would go to church every once in a while, but when I did, I wouldn't even pay attention. And so compare it to my new lifestyle where I'm, working out and I'm going to martial arts and stuff. You could see how the chart would start to go up. And you're getting the success. You're seeing, you start to build muscle and stuff. You start to, attract women that you could never attract before. Growing up, I never attracted a girl, and because I started working out, I remember I got my first girlfriend and everything when I started working out. And so it was just awesome. But By the way, man, I launched a pre-sale recently on my new community. You should go check it out. It's half off right now. So top link in the description, go check it out. And so I knew that if I stuck with this new lifestyle that I created, I would simply just improve my life and I would actually cure my depression. And it did, it worked. And the issue is, this is what a lot of people mess up on. Step 3 is to literally just stick with this. Stick with this new lifestyle you created of like all these self-improvement habits and everything. The issue is, you may think, it'll be linear like this. I was saying the chart was going up like this, but that's my mistake. It actually is like exponential like that. You can honestly like imagine the middle-aged person that gets into the gym and they think they're going to get the results like that, but it's more exponential. You don't get any results when you're going to the gym at first, and it sucks. And most people quit here, but then when they stick with it, they do step 3, they stick with it, that's when they start to get the results that they want. So it really reminds me of this story I wanted to tell you about one of my old friends. So I remember he was kind of into vaping and drinking and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what happened, but one day he was like, yeah, man, I quit all that. I'm trying to improve my life. And, I thought it was awesome, okay? And then one night I went to this party. It was the only party I've ever been to. I wanted to see what the nightlife was like. Everyone was drinking and it was so depressing. I was like, people actually live their life like this. They go out and they drink and they stay up until 2 a.m. And I don't know, it's just weird to me. I don't know about you, but I saw him at that party and he was so drunk. He did not know where he was. And then eventually, I hate to get too much into his business, but he was so drunk that he almost choked on his own throw up basically, and other people had to help him over and so he doesn't choke and die. But yeah, it was insane to see someone who wanted to improve their life and then it immediately just went downhill. They couldn't stick with it. That's one of the biggest issues that I see with people on this path. They try it, they're not getting the results that they want, and then they just deteriorate. They start to fall off basically. And I think one of the biggest reasons he had that kind of fall off is because he didn't do step 1. He didn't cut off the old lifestyle. He said he wanted to stop drinking and stuff, but he was still hanging out with the old friends that were into drinking. And so he was still living that shit lifestyle, and a shit lifestyle produces a shit mental health. And so he ended up drinking again. But look at my story. I had literally only 2 friends, and when they started making fun of me for getting into self-improvement and stuff, I cut them off. Because the question is, I'll ask you again, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to get the success? If you want it bad enough, you're not gonna half-ass this shit. You're not just gonna stay with friends who make fun of you for working out. That behooves me, bro. I don't know how someone would be friends with someone else who makes fun of them for working out. And so the 4th step of this blueprint, and honestly my favorite, is what we talked about earlier, is curing the loneliness. So this is when you will start to meet friends because you've sticked on this path for a long time. So you can imagine if that guy stuck on that path and he improved his life a lot, we could have invited him into our friend group and we could have went to the gym together and we could have talked about Christianity and stuff together, but unfortunately he didn't stick with it. And so I remember back then when I was alone and I was on this path, I heard about this analogy of, imagine you zoom out in your city, right? There is probably a handful of guys that are on this path like us. And so I remember that just motivated me to stick with this, and I knew that I would eventually meet the friends that are also on this path. And I did. I remember one day I was sitting in class and I was sitting next to this guy. I knew him from a year or 2 before because I knew he was also a funny person like me. We both had a goofy personality. And so I remember we were talking and I noticed he started saying some things like dopamine detox and stuff. And so I got his social medias, and I remember he's still my best friend to this day. I just remember I was like, oh my God, I finally met someone on this path. And the cool thing is that now we have a whole friend group of guys that are also on self-improvement and everything, and we talk about relationships, we talk about Christianity, we talk about the gym, dieting, entrepreneurship, online business, whatever. We talk about so many things that you can't talk about to a normal person. Imagine going up to a stranger and trying to talk about testosterone optimization, just this random stuff. It doesn't feel right when you're on this path, you're improving, and you know you have to stick with it, but maybe your family doesn't understand you, maybe your family's bullying you, but then when you stick with it long enough and you meet that one person, literally one person, who can just look at you and say like, oh, good job, man, I'm going to the gym today too, you want to go like hit push together, it just makes you feel like this path is right. And when you feel like this path is right, you're obviously going to stick with it way more. You have that person cheering you on and stuff, and it's amazing. It's an amazing life when you stick with this. You meet that one friend, and then eventually, like me, it'll grow into a friend group of other guys that are on this path that are like prioritizing their mental health and stuff, and it is just amazing. And by the way, I also launched a pre-sale on my community. It's top link in the description. It's half off right now. I want to build this sort of community of people like us who are trying to improve their mental health and all these self-improvement things. And I just want to get that sense of connection. If you feel like you're lacking that, you can check it out, top link in the description. I'm in there, you can come talk to me. But yeah, man, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.